What happens when a warm, beloved television star walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only for the interview to take a completely unexpected turn? What begins as a light-hearted discussion soon transforms into one of the most uncomfortable exchanges the audience has ever witnessed. As emotions rise and tempers flare, the atmosphere inside the studio changes in an instant, leaving the hosts, producers, and viewers wondering how everything unraveled so quickly. Before we dive into this dramatic story, be sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments who you think handled the situation better. It started as an ordinary morning at the studio. The production crew prepared for what was expected to be one of the easiest interviews of the week. Valerie Bertinelli had been invited to discuss her newest cookbook, her passion for cooking, and the personal journey that inspired her latest project. Everyone expected laughter, heartfelt stories, and a few delicious recipes. Instead, the atmosphere behind the scenes felt strangely tense. Some staff members noticed that Joy Behar seemed more serious than usual. The conversation before the cameras rolled was brief, and the mood around the table lacked its usual energy. No one imagined those subtle signs would soon lead to an unforgettable on-air exchange. When the show went live, everything appeared perfectly normal. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed Valerie with her signature warmth, and the audience greeted her with enthusiastic applause. Valerie smiled, thanked everyone for having her, and began talking about how cooking had become an important part of rebuilding her life after difficult personal experiences. "For me," Valerie said with a smile, "the kitchen became a place where I could slow down, reconnect with myself, and focus on something positive." The audience responded warmly, clearly relating to her heartfelt story. For several minutes, the interview flowed effortlessly. Then everything changed. Joy leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. "Valerie," she began, "many people are struggling with rising grocery prices and financial pressure. Do you ever worry that conversations about cooking and comfort might sound out of touch to families dealing with those realities?" The question immediately shifted the tone. Valerie looked surprised but answered calmly. "I understand why people might feel that way," she replied. "But my intention isn't to ignore anyone's struggles. Cooking helped me during one of the hardest periods of my life, and I simply wanted to share something that brought me hope." Joy wasn't completely convinced. "But isn't it easier to find comfort when you have resources that many people don't?" Valerie remained composed. "I've experienced difficult chapters in my own life too. My story isn't meant to compare experiences, it's simply something that helped me heal." The audience listened carefully as the conversation became noticeably more serious. Joy pressed further. "Some critics say celebrities often turn personal hardships into books, television appearances, or business opportunities. What makes your story different?" The room grew noticeably quieter. Valerie paused before answering. "I can only speak for myself," she said. "This book wasn't created to capitalize on difficult moments. It was created because cooking genuinely helped me reconnect with family, memories, and a healthier routine." Whoopi attempted to lighten the mood. "I think a lot of people can relate to finding comfort in food and family." But the discussion had already taken on a different energy. Joy continued asking challenging questions while Valerie patiently defended her perspective without raising her voice. The audience watched closely, sensing the growing tension around the table. Sarah Haynes stepped in, hoping to ease the atmosphere. "I think Valerie is sharing a personal experience that many viewers might find encouraging." Valerie nodded appreciatively. "My goal has never been to suggest my experience is everyone's experience," she explained. "If one person finds comfort through something I've shared, then writing the book was worthwhile." For a brief moment, the tension eased. Then Joy asked another pointed question. "So do you think celebrity stories sometimes receive attention that ordinary people with similar experiences never get?" Valerie took a thoughtful breath before answering. "That's a fair question," she said. "I can only control how honestly I tell my own story. If having a public platform allows me to encourage someone who's struggling, I hope that's something positive. The studio remained completely silent as viewers sensed that the interview had evolved into something far more serious than anyone expected. Whoopi finally stepped in, determined to calm the growing tension. "Let's slow this down," she said. "We're here to have a conversation, and I think everyone deserves the chance to finish their thoughts." But the atmosphere had already changed. Joy leaned forward, frustration evident in her voice. "I'm tired of pretending every celebrity story deserves applause," she said. "Sometimes difficult questions need to be asked." Valerie remained composed, though her disappointment was becoming clear. "I came here to share a personal experience," she replied. "If you disagree with something I've said, that's perfectly fair. But I'd appreciate discussing the ideas rather than making it personal." The audience grew noticeably quieter. Whoopi looked from one guest to the other, hoping the conversation would settle. Instead, the tension continued to build. Valerie stood from her chair. "I don't understand why this discussion has become so confrontational," she said. "I'm happy to answer challenging questions, but I'd like to be treated with the same respect I'm trying to show everyone here." Joy crossed her arms. "I'm asking direct questions because that's my job. And I'm answering them," Valerie replied. "There's a difference between asking difficult questions and assuming the worst about someone's intentions." For the first time, several audience members began shifting uneasily in their seats. Valerie looked directly at Joy. "I honestly think this conversation has become less about my book and more about frustration that's been building for a while." The remark hung in the air. Joy stared back for a moment before responding. "You think this is personal?" "I think you're directing a lot of anger at me that has very little to do with why I came here," Valerie answered calmly. The studio fell completely silent. Whoopi watched carefully, ready to step in if necessary. Joy took a slow breath before replying. "I believe public figures should expect difficult questions." "They should," Valerie agreed. "But difficult questions don't have to become personal." For several seconds, no one spoke. The silence itself seemed louder than the conversation. Whoopi finally stood. "I think we should pause for a moment." Before anyone could continue, Valerie quietly gathered her notes. "I think it's best if I step away," she said. Whoopi looked surprised. "You don't have to leave." Valerie smiled politely. "I appreciate that. But I don't want this interview to become something it was never meant to be." The audience responded with gentle applause. Joy watched silently as Valerie prepared to walk away. Before leaving, Valerie turned back toward the table one last time. "I came here hoping to talk about healing, family, and finding joy in everyday life," she said. "I genuinely wish all of us a little more of that." With those words, she walked off the set. The remaining hosts sat in stunned silence. Producers could be seen signaling from behind the cameras as the control room prepared for an early commercial break. The interview that had begun with recipes and personal stories had unexpectedly become one of the most talked about moments of the day, leaving everyone in the studio wondering how a simple conversation had taken such an emotional turn. "Is that really how you see this?" Valerie asked, keeping her voice steady. "Since I sat down, we barely talked about my book. We barely talked about my experiences. Instead, this conversation has become personal." Joy folded her arms. "I'm asking difficult questions." "Difficult questions are part of the job," Valerie replied. "Personal assumptions aren't." The audience remained unusually quiet. Joy let out a short laugh. "So now I'm the villain." "No," Valerie answered calmly. "I'm saying this interview has become something very different from what either of us expected." Sunny Hostin finally stepped in, hoping to lower the temperature. "Maybe we should pause for a second," she suggested. "I think everyone would benefit from taking a breath and getting back to the original conversation." Joy turned toward Sunny. I'm trying to have an honest discussion. And we're trying to have a productive one, Sunny responded gently. For a moment, no one spoke. Valerie looked toward the audience before speaking. I want to thank everyone who's been watching today, she said. My hope was simply to share a story that helped me through a difficult chapter of my life. Whether people relate to it or not is entirely up to them. The audience responded with light applause. Joy shook her head. You don't need to explain yourself. I'm not trying to win an argument, Valerie replied. I'm simply explaining why I came here. Whoopi stepped between the two conversations before they could escalate again. Let's bring this back, she said. We all want a good discussion, but we also want everyone to feel respected. Valerie nodded. I appreciate that. She gathered her notes and stood. I think it's best for me to leave today's interview here. Before walking away, she turned back toward Joy. I sincerely hope we can all have conversations that leave room for disagreement without losing respect for one another. With that, Valerie quietly exited the set. The studio remained silent as the cameras continued rolling. Sarah Haynes was the first to break the silence. That wasn't how anyone expected today to go. Joy sat quietly for a moment before answering. Sometimes live television doesn't go according to plan. Whoopi nodded thoughtfully. That's true. But it's also a reminder that the way we ask questions matters just as much as the questions themselves. Joy looked around the table. I care deeply about this show, she said. Sometimes that passion comes across more strongly than I intend. Sunny responded calmly. I don't think anyone doubts your passion. The challenge is making sure difficult conversations remain constructive. The panel sat in thoughtful silence. Behind the cameras, producers prepared for the next segment while the audience tried to process everything they had just witnessed. No one in the studio seemed quite sure how the morning had shifted so dramatically from a conversation about family, cooking, and resilience into one of the most emotionally charged interviews of the day. Whether viewers sided with Joy's tough questioning or Valerie's calm responses, one thing was certain: the interview would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Sunny spoke gently, hoping to ease the growing tension. Maybe this is a conversation we should continue after the show, she suggested. When we're off the air, everyone can speak more openly. Joy let out a quiet laugh. So we're supposed to wait until the cameras stop rolling, she asked. Then we all smile, shake hands, and pretend none of this happened. Sunny remained calm. I'm saying emotions are running high, and that's usually not the best time to solve difficult disagreements. Joy shook her head. No. If we're going to have an honest conversation, we should have it now. She looked toward the audience before continuing. People deserve authenticity. They deserve to know that television isn't always as polished as it looks. The studio grew noticeably quieter. Whoopi stepped in, her voice steady and reassuring. Joy, Whoopi said, we all care about this show, but we also have a responsibility to each other and to everyone watching. Let's bring this conversation back to a place where people can actually hear one another. Joy turned toward her. So staying professional means avoiding uncomfortable conversations. It means handling them in a way that moves the discussion forward, Whoopi replied. Not turning them into personal conflicts. The other co-hosts exchanged uncertain glances. Sarah sat quietly, while Sunny watched the conversation carefully, ready to step in if needed. Joy paced slowly across the stage before stopping. You know what worries me? She asked. Sometimes it feels like people are afraid to have honest disagreements. Everything has to be softened or carefully packaged. Sunny nodded thoughtfully. There's nothing wrong with honest disagreement, she said. The challenge is making sure honesty doesn't come at the expense of respect. For a brief moment, the room fell silent. Joy looked around the table. I've always believed audiences deserve authenticity. And they do, Whoopi answered. But authenticity and empathy don't have to compete with each other. The audience listened intently. No one applauded. No one interrupted. The discussion had shifted from a disagreement between two people into a broader conversation about public dialogue, media, and the responsibility that comes with having a national platform. As producers quietly prepared for a commercial break, it was clear that the interview had become something far different from what anyone had expected when the morning began. Whoopi spoke calmly, trying one last time to steady the situation. "Joy, we can talk about every concern you've raised," she said. "But this isn't the place to settle it. Our audience deserves a thoughtful conversation, not an argument." Joy let out a frustrated sigh. "So now we're worried about appearances," she asked. "What about honesty? What about saying what people are actually thinking instead of carefully choosing every word?" The studio had fallen completely silent. No one at the table interrupted. No one in the audience moved. Joy looked around the room before turning toward the cameras. "If people are watching," she said, "then they deserve to know these conversations don't always happen as smoothly as they appear on television." A murmur swept through the audience as producers exchanged anxious glances behind the cameras. Whoopi stood from her chair. "Let's pause for a moment," she said. "No one has to make any decisions while emotions are running this high." Joy slowly unclipped her microphone and placed it on the table. "I've spent years trying to balance honest conversations with entertainment," she said quietly. "Lately, I'm not sure I've been able to do either." The room remained completely still. Sarah looked at Joy with genuine concern. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said. "Whatever's bothering you, we can work through it together." Joy offered a faint smile. "I appreciate that." She gathered her notebook and personal belongings before looking around the studio one last time. "There comes a point when you have to ask yourself whether you're still the right person for the job," she said. "Maybe today is that moment for me." No one answered. The weight of her words seemed to settle over the entire studio. Whoopi took a step closer. "If this is really how you feel, let's have this conversation privately." Joy nodded. "Maybe we should." Joy walked toward the edge of the stage before stopping. She turned back toward her colleagues. "No matter what happens next, I want all of you to know I've always cared deeply about this show." Her voice was noticeably calmer now. "We've shared incredible moments together, and I'll always be grateful for that." Sarah's eyes filled with emotion. Sunny remained silent, watching carefully. Whoopi simply nodded. Joy smiled softly. "I think it's time for me to step away for today." With that, she quietly exited the set. The cameras stayed on the remaining hosts as they tried to gather themselves. Whoopi finally looked toward the audience. "We're going to take a short break," she said. "We'll be right back." The studio lights remained on, but the atmosphere had completely changed. As producers organized the next segment, the hosts sat quietly around the table, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. No one seemed interested in assigning blame. Instead, the focus shifted to how quickly difficult conversations can become emotional when strong personalities and deeply held beliefs collide. Whether viewers agreed with one side or the other, the fictional confrontation served as a reminder that public discussions are often at their best when honesty is matched with patience, and disagreement is balanced by mutual respect. What do you think? If you were watching this fictional showdown unfold, whose perspective would you have understood more? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more dramatic celebrity-inspired stories and entertainment content.